So we're back. So in in the enneagram, there are the 9 subtypes, and there are 3 main types, which are represented by the numbers 3, 6, and 9. One analogy might be that 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, and 8 are electrical paths, and 3, 6, and 9 are magnetic paths, like plus or positive or negative is 3. 3 could be viewed as positive, 6 is negative, and 9 is balanced between the two, which will become interesting as quantum computers come online, which are, for the first time, we will be able to represent things instead of through binary as yes and no, 0, 1, but through 3 different states. And that is what the uniqueness of quantum computing will be, is for the first time we will be able to build computer models of things as they are naturally existing. So there are 3 polarities or imbalances within the enneagram. There's overdevelopment and underdevelopment. Well, these are quantitative, and then there's a qualitative one, which is undevelopment. Like, you might be smart and you can figure things out, but you don't have any wisdom. Now, in the Bible, in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 7 and 8, we see these represented as the stone which the builders disallowed, the same is made the head of the corner, ascending, and a stone of stumbling, neutral, and a rock of offense, descending. Now, it's interesting, you never really, there is no book of the Enneagram. Later on, when we read Baha'u'llah's interpretation of these things, we'll see what he has to say, why that is. But in terms of underdevelopment, overdevelopment, and undevelopment, for wisdom, and we have Bhakti is related to, according to the Sufi traditions, she has studied undevelopment and cognitive problems, and we can see this in the modern psychology of Karen Horney. This would be like people who move away from people who they're detached, and that's like their neurosis. I'm kind of one of those people. But underdevelopment of wisdom, which is a cognitive problem, is you are ignorant, you're mistrustful, you're a multi-theist, you're preconscious, prejudiced, what she calls satanic, I guess, which we might view as being overly earthly. Overdevelopment of wisdom is like conjecture, and you're contemptuous and crafty, cunning, doubtful, foolish, malicious, stuff like this. Underdevelopment of wisdom is, you're an atheist, you're in denial, you're a disbeliever, you're fatalistic, you're unreliable, you're isolated, you're reactionary, and you have rationalizations and projection and repression and superstition. A lot of those bad, negative, neurotic things. So then we move on to, the heart, or kalb. And this is like Karen Horney's moving towards people. The compliant neurotic is, and it's developed out of harm and pain, and it's an underdevelopment of courage, and cowardly, bashful. You conceal the truth. Yeah, you have an inferiority complex. You're nervous, self-abasing. You lack self-esteem. But you can also have an overdevelopment of courage. And this is like Karen Horney's the type that moves against people and is angry and annoying and argumentative and arrogant, and you have a lot of enmity and hard-heartedness and harsh, and you're hostile and you're impatient and all, a lot of negativity. Then the undevelopment of courage is, you have anxiety. Maybe you have anxiety attacks. You delight in the misfortune of others. You have fear. Your fear of death, injustice, fear of other than God. Then, the attraction to pleasure, which is kind of like the same. It kind of overlaps with Karen Horney's, also the moving against type. Overdevelopment of temperance, you have apathy, complacent, despair, languid, obstinate, Overdevelopment of temperance, you're avaricious, covetous, unethical business practices, gluttonous, greedy, you're a hoarder, impudent, licentious, you have loss of self-respect, you love the world, you have overly lustful, you know, not really good things there. Then the undevelopment of temperance is like backbiting and envious and greed. I can't even read sad. Can't read my own writing. But the healing goes on in the traditional enneagram through diet, medication, poison, and surgery. And surgery is the most direct and probably the most, and from my understanding, the most analogous to what Baha'u'llah teaches. You know, he teaches in healing is like going to the divine physician, and the divine physician cuts out the cancer in you. But you know, in the nine-pointed enneagram symbol, the 3 points, the three subcategories of mind are 8, 9, in the first position 1, and in the heart it's 2, 3, and 4, and in the liver it's 5, 6, and 7. And each of these have polarities, you know, underdevelopment, overdevelopment, and undevelopment, where undevelopment is in the middle, you know, overdevelopment is on to one extreme, underdevelopment is to another extreme. But when you come to balance everything, when you are balanced in the whole, you become the 3, 6, and 9. You are 3, 6, and 9 represent balance and centeredness and groundedness. It's a lot to do, huh? But in this practice, you know, why do we have this correlation to language and invocation and saying mantras in Buddhism and Hinduism? You know, and they call that dhikr in the Baha'i faith and in Sufism. It's because, you know, language is an interesting part of our brain, but how this tradition has gone down is that the letters of the Arabic alphabet have different meanings and different qualities of hotness, coldness, and dryness and wetness. And you can break down in the Abjad numerological system, different letters have different qualities, like Aleph is fire and it's hot and dry, and Ba is air and it's hot and wet, and Gain is, for instance, is water and it's cold and wet, and Shin is, or Ain is earth and it's cold and dry. But it's interesting that the Bab gave us 19 months with these different divine names, names of God attached to it, the different names. In the first month, Baha is hot when you add the different letters up and their different qualities. For instance, Ba is air and it's hot, and the H is fire and that's hot, and the Aleph is hot and that's fire. But the Ain, the Gain is earth and it's cold. But when you have these 4 letters, but 3 of them are hot and 1 is cold, then that word is hot. And when you add up the different months, you get 8 hot words, 3 balanced words, which are neither hot nor cold, and 8 cold words that the Bab has put the monthly calendar to. But then we also have these intercalary days, and these are known as Ayami Ha, and Ha is hot. And hot is ascending. Hot is, you know, when you want to move towards something. And you know, then we have the balanced names and we have the cold names, which, you know, bring us down to earth. That's just one way I have been looking at things lately in terms of the Baha'i months and trying to correlate them to how I can do an invocation to move towards different positive traits that I want to see in myself through the calendar and the names in the calendar. It's up to you. I mean, there is no definition of how these things are laid out in the Baha'i faith. Which is interesting because Shoghi Effendi at one point told a pilgrim that a guardian would come that would explain these things, but that guardian has not come yet. I'm not the guardian, so I do not make any claims to guardianship. I'm just telling you what I've discovered. So now we're going to come into some things like there's both macrocosm and microcosm. In the macrocosm, we see the enneagram, the spiritual qualities, and in the stars and the planets. And this is where the origination of these concepts really comes from. In anthropology, we talk about how humans are always relating to their environment, and so we see 7 stars, and we make those stars in the ancient times into gods, and Saturn and Jupiter are gods. And this comes from, Proto-Indo-European religion, which predates Greek religion, Roman religion, Islam, Christianity, Judaism. It's very ancient. We're talking about 8,000 years ago. And we see some of these first formulations, like I said, in Eastern Turkey and Armenia. We know that these things existed a long time ago and got spread out throughout the world. But in the Quran, for instance, in Surah Buruj, it's called the Mansions of the Stars. So we know that astrology is there. That is the macrocosm, is the astrological symbolism of spiritual kind of traits and practice. And the first ayah of Surah 85 says, "By the sky containing great stars." So it's also interesting that in Christianity we have the story of the Magi, but there's no people imagine there are 3 Magi, but there's it nowhere states how many Magi there are, but they do come from the east as the sun sets in the west. Are the Magi the 12 constellations of the zodiac rising? When they're 3 gifts, those 3 gifts that they bring can be correlated to, again, Akal, heart, and, well, I should say Akal, Kalb, and Nas. Heart, mind, and our gut are in there in these 3 gifts. And it's really interesting that you can do that. I'm going to try and remember how these correlated. For instance, frankincense is related to prayer and spirituality, and myrrh is related to death and the mortal body. So you can see how the gifts actually, they symbolize something deeper. And one gift would represent kingship, for instance. So I'm going to move along this. So in the Quran we read, "And it is he who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and his throne had been upon the water, that he might test you as to which of you is best indeed. But if you say indeed you are resurrected after death, those who disbelieve will surely say this is not but obvious magic." Okay, so the important key point here I'm trying to make is it says his throne had been upon the water. The throne is upon the water. Now, Bakhtir makes a claim in her book on the enneagram that what the throne is upon the water from Quran 11:7 is talking about is, and the ancients observed the planets going through the constellations, and Saturn and Jupiter would go through the constellations, appearing in 9 of the constellations, but never in the water signs. So the enneagram represents those 9 palaces of the zodiac where Saturn and Jupiter appear. That's why there are 9, because it was directly related to people observing the stars. So we see in this diagram how the different constellations hook up with the different numbers on the enneagram and the different qualities of each sign. And we see that Cancer and Pisces and Scorpio are not associated with a number on the enneagram. And these are water signs. So the throne is upon the water is a reference to these spiritual teachings. In the Quran, it's mentioned, and then we have it here, and we can see it, that it doesn't appear in the water signs. So that's why the throne is upon the waters. It's a very interesting claim. Could do some more research to see how far it goes, if it's really true. There's a book by Titus Burkhardt called Mystical Astrology. It also states that the new cycle, the resurrection, will begin in the sign of Libra. And it's interesting to note that Baha'u'llah was born in the sidereal sign of Libra, and the Bab was born in our modern understanding of astrology in the sign of Libra. So now we're going to start to get into some really interesting things like alchemy. And I'm going to put this in another section, so break time.